I'm New York City Police. I mean, I thought it was the most ridiculous, no, not the most ridiculous thing. Shorts, the shorts on a police officer, ridiculous.
We wanted to know how professionals have changed over time, so we got 3 different experts from multiple decades to share their experiences.
I worked for the New York City Police Department from 1969 to 1996.
I served in the New York City Police Department for 20 years, from 1986 to 2006.
I served as a member of the New York City Police Department from 2003 to 2023.
Oh yeah, and this is the Plymouth Fury, 8 cylinders. They were good cars. And then they changed over to the blue cars.
But the Grand Fury, I liked it. It wasn't the fastest car in the world, had a V8. What I loved about it was, if you look at the front and the back, they're almost identical. It made it easy, it was narrow, great visibility. The K car in the back, they only had 1 or 2 of them when I was around. They were all busted up. Then we went to the Impalas. I didn't particularly care for the Impalas at all. I wasn't a fan.
So this is a Ford Crown Victoria, or Crown Vic as we like to call it. This was one of the first cars that I rode in. It felt more like driving a boat, the Ford Interceptor SUV. When they first started implementing these cars, only the bosses rode around in these cars. And then some years later, they integrated them into patrol. So this was a real luxury to ride in. Super fast, handled great. It was just more modern coming from the Crown Vic to this.
The bubblegum and a bubblegum top, just the one light on the top. Now with these cars, you had the rack up here, and you had inside, and it was a better setup and better communications. And then years later, of course, they put computers in. They had found that the siren here in the old cars, they weren't heard as well. This was a straight sound. You turned it on, that was the alarm. Here, you could have 3 different types of alarms.
The original sirens when I first started the Grand Furies, and even after that, you hit the horn button once and you get, we used to call it the whoop. Whoop them out of the way, whoop them out of the way. And you get that whoop. We had a couple different tones, right? You had that high-low European style, wee-wah, whatever. I liked a little bit of a mix. One sound constantly kind of just gets lost in the sauce. So if you mix it up, change it up, maybe somebody ahead of you will say, oh geez, something's going on, let me get the hell out of the way. Now it's just you hit the sound, you get that.
They call it the grumbler. It would make like a rumbling sound. The car would actually shake a little bit. Oh my God, it would just be like, everything would shake. That's it. That first, that's the shaking.
Well, when you had the sirens on, did people get out of the way for you?
Never.
But they always move for the fire department though.
A lot of them didn't have air conditioning. You used to have to fight to get an air-conditioned car. You'd sweat in these cars.
If you're asking if guys left the cars dirty, absolutely. So in the morning, sometimes you'd be picking up a real mess. You know, no gas in the car, coffee cups.
You would always smell like whatever someone ate. Everyone thinks their food smells good until the next person has to smell it.
And there was always an excuse.
Guys ever get punished for leaving it dirty?
Yeah, this is one of the stories that some people used to do. If one particular guy would leave the car awful all the time, they'd go down, if they had a stable, they'd go down and put horse manure on top of the air filter just before the end of the tour. And when the guy came in and relieved them and started up the car, and they go a few miles, and all of a sudden, this strange odor would come. That would cure the guy if he was dirtying the car, because he knew why that was done.
This actually looks a lot nicer than the car I rode in. It has all its hubcaps, which is very rare. Our cars typically did not look like this, and it figures because it is a highway patrol car.
The other stuff that guys did to them, which I never really understood, ripping the vents out, they'd poke holes in the dashboard so that they could stick their pen in there to make it like a pen holder, and the guys are pretty abusive.
People like to pick at the steering wheel, so there was always like little pieces of it missing for some reason.
This is the regular 38 caliber service revolver. It's a 6-shooter.
It's what I started out with in the police department from 1986 till probably early 90s, 94. So this is a Glock 19 pistol. It was one of the service pistols that was available to us when the job transitioned to 9mm.
I carried a Glock 19. 9mm, it holds 15 rounds. Using a revolver, it's slow on the reload.
It was very difficult to load and reload. You'd have to put the bullets in one at a time. Then they came with these speed loaders, which were made of like rubber. You had it on your belt, and you take the speed loader out and you could put it there, but it never went in exactly right. The left militants, they were using bombs and they were using 9mm.
Criminals are carrying these guns, and we were kind of being outgunned in terms of capacity. Other than capacity, I never really felt outgunned with it.
So a trigger pull makes the gun harder to fire. This gun actually has a trigger pull of anywhere between 11 and 12 pounds. It's a very hard pull. I think the newer models that they have in 2021, they have a 5-pound trigger pull.
It has a trigger pull. It's double action, single action gun. So the double action pull is a little on the long and stiff side.
Did you ever have to pull your gun?
Oh, yeah. One time, there was a man with a gun, and we go down in the basement. He's got a rifle pointed at me. You know, I had my gun out. So I disarmed him. Many times I could have used my weapon and it would have been what they call a good shooting, but I didn't. They didn't shoot. I didn't shoot. That's good.
Here's what I'm going to say. You pulled it almost every day, you know, for the most part. You really did. So, yeah, like I said, I was in a shooting. You know, not that I'm not proud of it, but not something I'd like to go over.
Do you ever have to pull your firearm?
No, I never put my firearm out on anyone.
Well, when I first came on, we were still using heavy wool. They called it serge. It soaked up the water. This is the choker. It goes around the neck. The collar is buckled together so tight that they call it a choker. The 70s were one of the first to wear the powder blue. They wanted to show a softer way, so they went to the light blue.
Yeah, I mean, we started with the light blue shirts. They were kind of sloppy. And then, you know, we transitioned to the dark blue shirts, which I wasn't crazy about at first, but I thought it looks a lot better, it looks a lot more professional.
This is standard wear. Most of these guys are wearing cargos, which were also authorized. Here, it looks like this guy right here is wearing a turtleneck with the shirt. This wasn't always standard. That was something that they implemented later.
You know what they say? Why they went back to the dark blue was that too many donut stains, coffee stains, and pizza stains showed on the light blue.
Yeah, I'm going to totally agree. You would see mustard stains. The ties would have stains on it.
Would you get stains on your shirt?
I was meticulous about keeping my uniform clean and spotless, and some guys weren't. I remember doing a roll call one time when I was a sergeant in Brooklyn, and this inspector came in to do the roll call and inspect the troops, and he stopped in front of this one guy, and he looked at me and he said, "Sarge, write him up." He said, "Slovenly appearance." I'm like, okay, that's what I'll do, slovenly appearance.
In Manhattan, you had to be extremely buttoned up. Him especially, he would probably get reprimanded for his wear. They inspected us in Manhattan like they did in the police academy. Your shoes had to be shined. Your uniform had to be like spotless, immaculate. You know, because you were in Manhattan, you were like a representative of the department. You really had to be on point.
Did you ever get reprimanded?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did as a rookie.
I'm seeing if I know these guys. The thing that I hated the most, and that was the baseball cap.
The baseball hat at first I thought would be great. I said, all right, this is great. This is better than this 8-point thing here. And then they made you put that 2-pound hunk of metal cap device on it. So this is what we call the cap device. It has the NYPD or state insignia, whatever the case may be, the 2 Indians. And then underneath it would be your shield number, which had a threaded piece in the back that you screwed in, and that thread was about that long, and it was constantly hitting you in the head. It didn't last long.
You know, I'm not on the New York Yankees, New York Mets. I'm New York City Police. I mean, I thought it was the most ridiculous. No, not the most ridiculous thing. Shorts. That was the most ridiculous thing. The shorts on a police officer. Ridiculous. You see a number of mustaches. That's a police mustache. You see the picture here. Look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everybody had a mustache. Guy walks into a bar. Gotta be a cop. Had a mustache.
Well, that's the 70s porn star stash. If you were a cop at that time, you had a mustache.
Did you have that beard?
No beards. The only way you could have beards was you had to have, we used to call it the bumps, right? Which there's probably some technical name like a folliculitis or something, whatever. But if you had the bumps, it couldn't shave, but it had to be neatly trimmed. You know, looked more like a 5 o'clock shadow, but no, not me. It wasn't my thing.
Around 2016, they relaxed their policy on beards. I believe they probably initially did it because the job was becoming more diverse and a lot of people had beards for religious reasons. Of course, all the guys were happy about that, especially the younger ones, because they wanted beards because they felt it made them look older and people wouldn't know that they were new on the job, which, you know, was pretty funny.
Yeah, you know, around $13,000 was my starting salary in 1971. It was enough.
So 1986, my starting salary, roughly with night shift differential and a little bit of overtime, was about $35,000, $36,000. At that time, it wasn't bad. The sad part is that starting salary hasn't changed much in 30 years.
34,000, something like that. I was 24 years old, so yeah, it was enough because I hadn't moved out on my own yet.
A lot of the people wanted to join the NYPD. their family, former NYPD, they had an advocation for it. I just happened to score very high in the exam.
I actually turned it down once or twice, and then in 1986, I was out of college a couple of years already. I had jobs, but no career. Took the test again, and I said, this time I'm going. And I loved it. It was a great time. It was a ticket to the greatest show on earth, as they say.
I joined the NYPD because I lost a family friend in 9/11. His name was Sergeant Rodney Gillis, and he was very close to my family. And I felt like I wanted to join the NYPD and pick up where he left off.
I was made a police officer in January 1971. I was sent to the 7-5 precinct in East New York, which is a high crime area, where you learn to be a police officer. From there, I went to narcotics, and this is the time during the crack era. And I went to a unit called the crack unit, where we made a lot of arrests on crack. And we were responsible to clean up the crack, get the people off the street. So I made many arrests in narcotics. And then when I finished there, I went into a detective squad. I worked every crime imaginable. And then I retired.
My first command was the 72nd Precinct in Brooklyn, Sunset Park. ESU was what I had always wanted. And at that time, it was a phone call. It was a hook. Did a couple years there, made sergeant, went to the press office, spent 4 or 5 years there. Learned the hard way how things work in the palace, the political aspect of the job, right? And then 9/11 happened. ESU took a big hit, right? 14 of the 23 guys were from ESU. Made some phone calls, and by that afternoon I was transferred back and then finished up there till 2006.
I started out in Midtown South, and my post was from West 28th Street to West 45th Street, all along 7th Avenue. And that was all on foot, which was a fun time because you got to learn who everyone was. You knew everyone, so you got to learn the neighborhood, learned who lives there, who doesn't. And then when I went to the Bronx as a supervisor, I just pretty much covered everything. So I really love my time in the Bronx.
In the 1970s, they didn't call it domestic terrorism. They're very careful with their words. They call it political disturbances. Not one day didn't go by, practically, that there wasn't a bombing or there wasn't a shooting all across the nation. And the people who got hit the worst, New York City was one of them. We had about, just in 1969, probably 50 incidents. One time they had bombed 8 buildings all in one day. And there was a lot of sympathizers with the militant groups. When you went out on patrol, you had to be very careful. The most earth-shattering day was when Rocco Lloyd and Gregory Foster were assassinated by the Black Liberation Army. They were walking by a stoop. And as they got past the stoop, 3 people came off the stoop, shot him. No warning, nothing. As Gregory lay on the ground, they shot bullets in each of his eyes. Rocco, they shot him in the groin. So this wasn't just an assassination. This was to humiliate. And then they had done nothing. Others were killed after that also. It was significant, these 2 guys, because they were young. 23, 24 years old. They were both in Vietnam. A little easier to kill you in Vietnam than it was on the streets of New York. At least it was that way. It should have been that way, and it wasn't. They served their country, and to die like that, that hits, that hurts.
So at the time I was assigned Brooklyn South Narcotics, I was literally home sleeping. My middle brother was a construction worker in Manhattan, rang my phone and said, hey, you better get up, you gotta go in, a plane just hit the Trade Center. And I was thinking Cessna, some pilot had a heart attack and hit the building. 40 minutes later he calls me, he's like, are you going into work, what are you doing? Another plane just hit the other towers. And I'm like, it's too early for you to be drinking, what the hell is that? I got up, turned the TV on, stood there totally amazed. So I'm like, this is bad. Grabbed an AR-15, which was legal at the time, a couple of magazines, headed into work. I walk into the Brooklyn South Narcotics office, got an AR-15, a bag full of mags, and it was chaos. Guys just running out. There's only a limited amount of vehicles. So I grabbed guys, whoa, hold up. That's, if the vehicle holds 4 people, make sure you're going down with 4 people. Let's not go down with 1 or 2. I know we all want to get there. I wound up getting the ferry ride into Manhattan because they had shut the bridges, nobody could drive in. So we had to drive down to Brooklyn Army Terminal, get on one of these fast ferries, and they basically drove us over to Chelsea Piers and threw us off, climbed over the side of the boat and onto the pier. We were like a reserve, let's say. There was a couple big chiefs there. All right, lieutenants, captains, let's go. Grab your people. How many guys you got? Started putting rosters together in teams, and little by little they would send the guys out. the dust, right? I remember seeing two of my guys show up all of a sudden, and from the knee down, their pants are white. Like, you guys went down there, didn't you? You told me you were going for coffee, and you were supposed. Yeah, no. So everybody from basically the knee down, if you were down in this area, it was just one of those telltale signs. Your legs were white, just from all this dust, all this powder. This is all pulverized concrete, pulverized sheetrock, and just, it was almost like a badge of honor, right? You'd see other cops, the national cops, Jersey cops, and they all had that white stain from the knee down or the mid-calf down, and, they were there.
It sounds like all you guys from all over the city came into Manhattan. What was going on to crimes in the rest of the boroughs?
It really kind of shut down. I think even the criminals were in awe of what the heck happened. Obviously, precincts maintained a certain amount of coverage, but my recollection from later was that I think even some of the news stories were basically like for 3 or 4 days, there was like nothing going on. Even the bad guys were shot. So this is what we used to call the pile, right, or the hole, ground zero. This was the pile. A lot of it would have been what we call bucket brigades, just hundreds and hundreds of cops, all with 5-gallon spackle buckets or paint buckets, and passing buckets up, a couple guys shoveling in and then passing, literally digging the place out by hand. And this was the day. This was, the purple mask was what they handed us, the N95s. You'd have some tools, and it was just digging. There was, every now and then you'd catch a little void maybe, and guys would do a search, but a couple of the Port Authority guys that were injured and trapped that you got out, and you held out hope for something like that, but, those were few and far between, unfortunately. NYPD, we're fortunate, relative term. We lost 23 guys, less than everybody else. 14 guys were from my unit, 14 friends of mine. It was history.
I would say the biggest thing for my time there was the George Floyd incident. I feel like that one incident changed the way not only we police, but policing across the country. These were people protesting the murder of George Floyd. These people just wanted to be heard. We were listening to them at first, but it got very bad very quickly. I saw it from both sides. My time in the police department, people, are arrested all the time. That shouldn't result in someone dying. What I saw as a Black woman was hurtful. And I don't think any good cop condoned what they saw. I took this job to help people, as the majority of the people that I worked with. It's almost like what you were working for was kind of like destroyed in an instant by a cop that wasn't even, a part of NYPD. It was tough because people were working for long hours. We were out there all night. When you work a protest, you don't get to say, okay, it's 8 hours, time to go home. You're there until they disperse. So now you have days of that one end. People are tired. People are on edge. Yeah, this says we see police get away with murder. As a police officer, when I see statements like this, I feel like they're very blanket. It's kind of like, why are we getting this flack? This did not happen here. There was an incident when I was in the 4-3. A woman was shot and killed, unfortunately, by a fellow sergeant. It was terrible. I knew the guy personally. He's a good guy, very fair guy. And to see people come in that did not live there, try to call him a murderer, try to target his family. Our community were the ones that rallied around us. The people came to the precinct to protest, and our community was right there with them and saying, no, you guys don't live here, go home. We live here, we work here, we know our cops. We don't want you here, and they told them that. And those people left. You would see something like this on the news and feel that everywhere, everyone hates police. And I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think it's accurate all the time, and it's tough. It's tough to see.
People who will complain about the police because they got a violation, whether it be a traffic ticket, whether it be a parking ticket. But at that particular time, boy, they don't like the police. And something happened, you got robbed, or your house is burglarized. Where's the police? If something happens, they want you to be everywhere.
I think in general, they liked us. There's always that faction that's, well, you're an occupying army and you come in here and you run back to Long Island or wherever, which wasn't me, but there was always that group like that.
In my opinion, I don't think everyone hates cops. I think the majority of people want to see cops. Criminals hate cops. It's only how you interact with people and how you talk to people. They're bad eggs in any profession. If I had a bad experience with a doctor, I wouldn't say, oh, all doctors are horrible. Do police departments have work to do? Absolutely.
Knowing what I know, I probably would not be a police officer. Not that I loved it. I loved it being a police officer, but you first get there, you're doing midnights, doing 4 to 12s, you're doing 8 to 4s. You're not home for holidays, you're not home for weekends. It's not a great life.
Today, you watch the videos, guys are mounting off on car stops, just zero respect, so terrible. Absolutely could not recommend anybody in good faith taking this job here.
People don't respect police like they used to. When I came on, you respected the uniform. You saw a cop on a post, they told you things one time, that was it. People now, they like to fight. It's the age of social media. People like to film the police and get in the way. Police are afraid to make mistakes. Makes you hesitate more, which is just not good for anyone. When I came on, you couldn't even use your phone. Now we have our memo books on our phones. We're always using the phone. We use phones to run people's background.
I always see police officers at the train station near me. They always go, they're always on their phone.
That's why they're always on their phone. We're in a different age.
I thought I had the best job in the world as a New York City detective, solving crimes. You start out with nothing and you make a plan, and you arrest them and bring them in to the family. Now they know who killed their son, daughter, or whatever.
Family ever say thank you to you?
So of all the homicides that I solved, I never got a real thank you. And that's part of the job. Don't let it bother you.
I love the job. I delivered a baby one time, a couple of water rescues. It was the greatest show on earth. It really was. And the politics aside, let's say, if you're a trooper or some other department, you may be riding the road for 20 years. There is so much here to do, so many different aspects of this job. There's specialized units, there's detectives, there's robbery units, there's emergency service unit, there's an aviation unit, there's harbor unit. There's all these scuba units, all these things to do, as opposed to some other jobs where your best day is going to be the same day at 1 year as it is at 19 years.
I do love the job. Yeah. It made me who I am today.
I love wearing this uniform. I had this uniform on this morning when I was in CVS, and then the pharmacist says, do you need your prescription expedited? And I said, yeah, I'm going to London. So she had it for me in 5 minutes.
We wanted to know how professionals have changed over time. So we got different experts from multiple decades to share their experiences.
We're looking at a 747. It was the most exciting plane, my favorite plane. It was like a floating hotel. I remember, here I am, 21 years old, and I looked at the plane and I went on it, and of course we have first class, and then we had business class, and then we had 3 sections of coach. I thought I was done, and I opened the curtains and there's a whole nother section back there. I was like, oh my God, this is never gonna end.
There were people who said, does this thing really get off the ground?
It may interest you to know that the complete flight of the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk could have taken place inside a Boeing 747.
The enormity, the size of this aircraft, it was like flying a building. The 747, the Queen of the Skies, was without question our favorite airplane of anything that ever flew. But it's pretty much the world's favorite aircraft.
My favorite airplane is a 747. I'm sure it's probably most of the flight attendants that flew. It's one of our favorites.
Seeing that Pan Am blue ball, which they called the meatball, the logo at the time was called the meatball, all around the world, this meant home. We were the unofficial flag carrier for the United States. When you saw that, it was something special. Is this a DC-10?
You seem less impressed with the DC-10.
The DC-10 were aircrafts that we acquired through the acquisition or merger with National Airlines. The passenger level is here where you'll see the windows and the livery line there. But underneath, there is a lower lobe galley. So there was an elevator that would take you down to the lower lobe galley. I tried never to work down there, mind you, because I didn't want to get stuck down there. The elevators would break frequently, and since all your meals are loaded downstairs, we had to find ways to get the meals to the upper deck where the passengers were. There was a floor compartment that you could lift up, and it had access to the galley below. So we used to, if you were down in the galley, we would come over and start handing the trays up through this hole in the floor that we opened up.
So like a trap door?
So it was like a trap door. We were hand carrying trays all through an airplane that, was holding 300 people. Wasn't the best presentation, but it got the job done.
Right, we're looking at the United Airlines 767. And it's actually one of the oldest planes in the fleets today that's still 30-something years old. And that we still have 767s in present day that I fly on at United. I loved it because the passengers felt like they had more space.
Did you like the DC-10?
It was kind of sometimes daunting when you're a new flight attendant, you're working down below, and you're down there by yourself. It's kind of eerie, and you're hearing, you hear the engine noises, and back then we had the kennel next to it, so sometimes you'd hear barking, animals, and so it was kind of a very interesting experience.
Continental, we flew DC-10s. I flew those to Rio de Janeiro for many years. That was one of my favorite birds. This is the 787. This is the Dreamliner. This has great ventilation, you breathe better.
Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, well, we're not talking about a 2-hour flight. We're talking about a 14-hour flight to Asia. Breathing makes a difference. The air quality definitely, and this aircraft has the better system.
When I started flying, they didn't have a liquor cart. We actually had to make them. I sound really... In the 70s, when I was on a 727 and a 707, we would unfold a cart, set up a cart, a 3-tiered cart. It was a lot of work. And we had to have the first cocktail out in 12 minutes. That was the rule. Service was service, and we were #1 in service, American Airlines. We were. The plane could be still going up like that, and we'd be out of our jump seats setting up the 3-tiered cart. That's why I have strong legs now. No veins, because of just going up and down and all the exercise I got. And the service was never ending. From being on the ground, we served champagne. It looks like she's serving champagne. She could be on the ground because people are standing up. And people were allowed to stand up. People were allowed to roam around. There was none of this. Now everybody has to stay in their seat with the seatbelts on. That's why I think people are so cranky now. And then we had the upstairs, up the 747, we had a spiral staircase going up. After you finished your meal, you went up there to see and be seen. All the first class, the movie stars would go up there and hang out. Nobody was working on a computer up there.
So this is essentially like a lounge?
Yes. It was a lounge. And we had a piano in the back, and people would play the piano during, after the meal service. People who knew how to play the piano.
So it wasn't a staff piano player. Anybody who can play can just go up there.
Yeah, but we also had famous people go in the back and play the piano.
Do you ever hear anybody famous play the piano?
No.
Yep, that was my era. It was an exclusive club in the sky, especially for those traveling in first and business class. And the helicopter service was amazing. It left from the 34th Street Seaport, and you could really be from Manhattan to JFK and go right into the Clipper Club in about 10, 15 minutes and check in for your flight. On this side, you're looking at the pre-plated entrees that are on China that would have been served in a first-class cabin on Pan Am. You'll see that there is a flight attendant offering items off a cart. And you can also see on here there's a bud vase, because we always had fresh flowers. They each got a flower on their table setup. You can see this tureen on the top, and that has all the accoutrements that would be served with the caviar. It was only the finest Russian beluga caviar, nothing else. It was flown in fresh from Moscow daily. I see a pate, which is also very popular in the 80s. Everybody had pate, and again, a lot of that pate was sent in from France. It was fresh pate. And then you bring out the entrees. We cooked a fresh Chateaubriand. We had cooking ovens. They don't have cooking ovens on airplanes anymore. They have reheating ovens. When the roast beef or the Chateaubriand was boarded, it was raw. but there was always a roast. Then we'd go to the seat and we would carve a slice off.
In the 90s, we had lovely choices, and we would start off also with the appetizer, your mixed nuts, the warm nuts, and then you'd go into your appetizer, then your salad, and your entree. Breakfast chair, lovely omelet with juice, coffee. We had the silver pots, the silver service in first class. We didn't serve the tenderloin to order at the time. We didn't cut in the aisle like we did with the Pan Am. I would say it was more of a streamlined than it was with Pan Am.
Now, what was a first class seat like?
Oh,
back
big, very big. But we have better first class seats now. They lay flat. You get pillows and blankets. Well, of course you had pillows and blankets then too, but I don't know. I think the seats have come a long way. But these seats look very comfortable, and they were very comfortable.
We're looking at sleeperette seats, they were called. They were comfortable, and you could get some sleep.
These were the business class seats. I look back at these and I think, oh my gosh, they don't even look that wide, or they don't look that spacious as opposed to, business class seats today. And, the lovely design, the stripe. What are your controls? You've got to go lean back and to go forward. Definitely maybe better than some of the other airlines of the 80s that had, but not anything compared to, the bigger seats that we have today in business class. But back then it was comfortable and people loved them.
Polaris. These are your individual beds here. We have mattress pads. So we'd put one down and then put down a sheet on top of the mattress pad, like a fitted type sheet, and then a flat sheet for you to pull over, and then on top of that, a duvet. It's a Saks Fifth Avenue duvet, so it's nice, good quality. It's great because you just fly 16 hours, you land in Asia, and you're ready to go. But we did have a big problem with this. Now I'm looking at them, and if something fell into the seat, forget about it. Like, you really had to be MacGyver to get it out.
Those seats look pretty comfortable. This looks like a typical coach cabin from the 70s where people are happy, they're excited, they're happy to be traveling, they're smiling.
3 across, yes, that's 3 across, so that's probably going to be a coach flight. Well, they were bigger then. You had more space. You don't have much room to push your seat back today.
Oh my gosh, Coach. The seats, they weren't as close together. They had a little bit more space. So passengers weren't on top of each other. I think it was just, even the aisles were a little bit wider. I think when they started taking rows out, it just became more, uncomfortable for some of the passengers. They just put in more passenger seats, and some of the planes, they took up more galley area. In the 90s, we still had, pillows and blankets. We served meals in the 90s back there. Every flight had over 2 hours had a meal. And the ubiquitous peanuts, we were able to serve those without too much of a controversy. And we usually had a little bit more extra flight attendants on board. So I think economy back then was a comfortable experience.
It turned into a bus. It's a commute.
And there's the big screen that everybody gets to watch the same movie. Everybody watched the same movie. People were thrilled to be able to watch a movie, but they had to pay for the movie. We had to sell the headsets. I'm trying to remember how much they were. I think they were $5 or maybe $3 when I started. We had the headsets that we had to plug in the little earpieces to. And then at the end, we had to count them all up and put them in a bag and then lock them. It was a lot of paperwork.
It didn't matter. It was a terrible movie. They wanted something just to pass the time, I think. We couldn't get satellite television. We couldn't get any of that.
This is the projector and the Super 8 movie cartridge.
It was big and clunky. And when it worked fine, it was great. When the system didn't work, then you heard about it.
Most of the aircrafts now have TVs in the headrests.
Would it ever cause you guys headaches?
We have a reset system where we can go and troubleshoot the actual seat. Sometimes it was the whole row, so if this guy is already halfway through a movie and this guy's movie goes out, then we have to reset the whole thing, so he's not a happy camper. Oh, free drink is not a problem. Are you kidding me? That's easy. People these days, they want a mortgage payment.
And I'm grateful for today's technology. I miss some of the things that we had in the past. I think that, I miss the fact that you communicated more back then. It's because you've got your headphones in, you've got your screens in front of you, you're kind of in your own little world, and I always like working up front because I feel like, when you're doing a service, you get more of an opportunity to, speak to the passengers.
I never had any complaints, except about smoking.
All right, smoking on airplanes.
Yes, that was a thing.
Oh, there were cigars, there were pipes. The smoke was so intense on the plane that my eye makeup would be dripping down my face. I couldn't breathe, and I remember calling the union and getting the union president on the phone and telling her I can't breathe. And she goes, well, you're going to have to medically disqualify yourself from flying then. That was the union response. And people would fall asleep with cigarettes in their hands. They could start a fire. That was the real danger, starting a fire on the airplane.
Excuse me. Perhaps you didn't realize, but this is a no smoking zone, and I'll have to ask you to put the cigarette out.
Oh, I'll just be a minute, actually. I mean, I realize it's no smoking, but it'll just be a minute.
You know, there were always people who would book a seat in a non-smoking section and then want to smoke. Because ironically, a lot of the smokers didn't want to be in the smoking section, but they wanted to smoke. And of course, the people seated around them were not terribly happy if somebody would light up a cigarette.
We used to go in there and clean them and make sure that they were fresh. Now, you know, we got a lot more people traveling that are not familiar with flying. They don't know how to use the bathrooms. They don't know how to open the door. They may take the paper and put it in the wrong receptacle, or they don't know how to flush.
We cleaned the bathrooms. We were actually responsible. I know nobody will touch them today, but you know, we had to use them too. You know, so we would go in, you know, kind of clean it down, just because there was a sense of pride. It depended on how really bad it was. I mean, there were sometimes we would just say, that one is locked off.
Oh, geez. The blue room. I think I remember the first time that we called it the blue room because when it was blue coming out of the toilet, we'd say, oh, you know, you got to go take care of the blue room. Or, anybody in the blue room? And obviously there were extracurricular activities that went on in there at times that they were known for back in the day, you know, the Mile High Club that they had called it back in the, 70s, 80s, whatever it was.
Is that for real?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. People, for some particular reason, they just thought that was the cool thing to do. And so they would just disappear in there, and one would go in first, and sometimes another would go in after that, knock on the door.
Would you scold them?
Yes. You know, say, excuse me, this is meant for all the passengers and not, there'd be flight attendants who would line up and they'd clap or something crazy, or they'd just stare at them. And, you know, I mean, most of the time it was a reaction of, this is not cool. You don't do this on an airplane. And why would you want to? It's a small bathroom. It's not sometimes the cleanest place to be. But like anything else, people want to do something to say they did it. No, it was just different times, crazy times.
You know, these bathrooms, as the years have gone, I don't know if it's me getting bigger or the bathrooms getting smaller, I don't know. But these bathrooms are so tiny. And I've seen, you know, some disasters happening in these bathrooms. Oh, glad I don't have to use these bathrooms anymore.
We met movie stars so many times, but you had to act calm. You couldn't act all excited and weird. This is just a little notebook. I would write down on the menus who was on my plane that day. I had Liza Minnelli, I had Liz Taylor, Nicolas Cage, Joni Mitchell, Stevie Wonder, O.J. Simpson, Farrah Fawcett, Sarah Jessica Parker, Robert Redford, Donald Trump, Alan Alda, Al Pacino 3 times. I loved Al Pacino. This is Richard Nixon. I was not a big fan of Richard Nixon. I was in coach on a DC-10 in the Caribbean, and Richard Nixon was in coach then because he had already left office, and he was sitting with Pat, and he was on my side, so I had to take care of him. So I went over to him and asked him if he needed anything, and he grabbed my hand and he said, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." And I burst into tears because my mother had just tragically died that week, and she was only 55 years old, and she died very suddenly. So I'm crying, and I'm trying to compose myself, and I said that my mother had just died. He held my hand for 45 minutes. In 34 years, he was the nicest passenger I've ever had on board.
I was living in Manhattan at the time and was leaving for a flight, and I came down from my apartment. I had my uniform on and my wheels with me, and on the corner of my building, there was a stretch limousine parked and the windows were up, but I noticed on top of the limousine was a pair of sunglasses. So I tapped on the rear passenger window, and the window came down, and there was Rod Stewart staring at me. And he just, I handed him his glasses, said, "I think you forgot something." He said, "Thank you very much." The window rolled up, and he went on his merry way. I went off to the airport. I was operating a flight to London that night. And here comes, walking down the jetway, none other than Rod Stewart. And he kind of looks at me, kind of trying to place where he might have known me or why does he recognize me. But as he got closer, all of a sudden he looked at me and I looked at him and I was kind of laughing. And I looked at him and I said, well, you could have at least offered me a ride.
I remember a great flight with Mick Jagger, and he couldn't sleep, so I was just making drinks. He's like, hey, you want me to make some drinks with you? And I'm like, who gets, how often do you get to make a drink with Mick Jagger? So he was so cool, and was so nice, and so he was just up there shaking it up. And that was back in the day when we made cocktails, and just shaking it up and poured a couple drinks. And I served it to passengers, and I said, you're never going to believe who just made this drink.
I was working in first class, so I'm wearing the bow tie and the white serving garment. This guy comes on board and he goes, hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. And I said, hey, how you doing? I'm Carlos. And he's like, cool, Carlos, hey, do me a favor, lose the bow tie, lose the jacket. I have all of first class booked. He's like, you know who Marilyn Manson is? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, the whole band is up here, and so, we'd like to have a relaxed flight. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. And they just started coming on one by one. Twiggy Ramirez, Madonna Wayne Gacy, Marilyn Manson, and flying from Newark to Lisbon, Portugal, shaking martinis in the middle of an aisle. It was great. It was fun. So when we land in Portugal, and while we're there checking in, like the whole band comes in, and Twiggy's like, dude, you're here. And I'm like, yeah. This is Madonna Wayne Gacy and Twiggy Ramirez and myself. And we went out for dinner. This guy wanted to drink absinthe. And I'm like, yeah, all right, whatever, I'll drink absinthe with you. Mind you, I had to work the next day, but yeah, we had a fun time. If you see here, he's holding up a set of wings. I gave him my wings that night for him, extending the invitation to me and taking me out that night.
I was in charge on an all-nighter coming home, and I sat next to Robert Klein and Jay Leno. And I kept giving them drinks, and they would sit with me, and they were telling me jokes the whole way. And Jay Leno, he asked me out. There was a lot of, people asking people out. Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of sexualization going on. Other airlines like Braniff, they had the short shorts. I don't know how you could work in those though. I was the shortest one, and I had to stand on top of the seat to get into the overhead bin. So. I don't think that would be a good idea to have short shorts on.
National had a campaign that was fly me. I'm Linda, fly me. We didn't do things like that. That wasn't Pan Am's brand. It wasn't what we advertised. It wasn't what we were trying to sell. We were selling sophistication. We were selling business. We were selling cross-cultural appeal.
Did you have men hitting on you?
I was so innocent. I really was. Even though I grew up in Brooklyn, I was pretty innocent. It didn't happen to me. And I never had that with the pilots either. They never hit on the flight attendants because they were so old. They got their flying hours from World War II. They were like your grandfather.
Did you ever get hit on by passengers?
Sure, of course. They would flirt with you, and I was very observant at the time whether they'd have a wedding ring on or not before I was married. And all of a sudden you'd see the wedding ring slip off, and you'd go, okay. And they would start, talking to you and hitting on you. And I'm like, okay, well, does that wife that has that ring, with that ring in your pocket, is that, something that you'd like her to know about? So I called some people out on it before.
How about pilots?
I think that, there are different times in my career when, you're kind of naive, and maybe some pilots would try to take advantage of that, and you offer you, come watch TV in my room, but they didn't really want to watch TV. And so you obviously realize, what they have in mind, and you get out there really quick. And
there were very strict physical requirements for flight attendants back in the 70s, extremely hard. You had to have makeup on at all times. You had to have lipstick on. You had to have nail polish. The most you could weigh was 119. But if you got to that weight, they would torture you and put you on weight check. And I had that experience a few times, and it wasn't very pretty. If you did not lose a pound and a half a week, you could be suspended with no pay. You could lose your job. And it was very scary for flight attendants that had children. When they were allowed to have children, they had to weigh the same as what they did when they first got hired. And they just had a baby. And they couldn't go back to work to pay the bills until they weighed what they were supposed to weigh. So it was really difficult.
How did that make you feel?
Well, I wanted that job. We all wanted that job. And we did whatever it took to keep that job. And we put up with a lot. because we wanted to be flight attendants, and it was the best career.
In the 90s, we just kind of didn't have to have that, approach to things as much as we did back in the day. We were still weighed, at times. And we still had a grooming supervisor. So I think that there were good things.
When did men become flight attendants?
I think that there weren't really as many. There were stewards in the beginning when they started. And then I think more in the 2000s, I think it started to become that more men became flight attendants. And it was wonderful because so many great guys are flight attendants, and it's as it should be. And there were a lot of things on an airplane that's nice to have, a man around. And I think that there was no reason not to.
San Francisco, definitely, was my favorite.
I had many. I always loved flying to Rome. If I could get to Rome all the time, I would.
Oh my goodness, I think, Italy, the food and the wine. I mean, I just, you can't get better than that.
There's so many, man. There's so many. I mean, Hawaii, it's great. It's a crummy room. The hotel is like ancient. The room is crummy, but you're in Waikiki Beach. It's like,
It depends. If we were in Arkansas, we might go out with the cockpit. We really didn't hang around with them, but if we were in an unusual or weird place and there were some safety concerns, not because we were young girls alone, we would meet the cockpit and go out with them. But most of the times we went out with the girls, and we didn't have a lot of money. And we were always on diets because we couldn't eat anything.
Just go out and party?
Sure. It wasn't always, but usually we tried to stay together. And there were restaurants that were particularly known for Pan Am Cruise. In Frankfurt, there was a place that we nicknamed, it wasn't the real name, but it was nicknamed the gas station. I mean, literally, I think Pan Am Cruise kept the restaurant going for decades.
Absolutely. It was wonderful. That's the great thing about the camaraderie. And, when I started with National, we were just, we were kids, 20 years old, 19, 20 years old when I started. And we would be on reserve, and we'd all have our beepers. We'd by the pool, and we'd be hanging out, and we'd go on layovers. And at the time then, we would the whole crew would go out. Same with Pan Am. It's just, we had such great times. I mean, we went all over the cities together.
Boom, I land in Milan. I want to go out. I want to see Milan. I'm here for 24 hours, I want to go have dinner. I want to go see what's, I'm a young guy. I'm single. I want to see what's happening, But once you get that out of your system, then you already know what to do and how long to sleep. That was really important.
It's more individualized now, I would say. I mean, I still go out with the crews, but it's a lot of, people do kind of their own thing. Things are very different.
I loved being a flight attendant. I still have dreams about being a flight attendant. I work on an airplane at least once or twice a week in my dreams. And it's so funny because I am not alone. Mechanics have these dreams. Cargo people have these dreams. Ticket agents have these dreams. We call them flight mares because they're kind of, you can't get through security. You can't find your ID. You can't find your suitcase. You can't find your gate. That's what these dreams are all about. Maybe it's post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know.
I adored it. The whole saying is it's an addictive lifestyle. You might complain about things, but you wouldn't do anything else. When you're flying internationally, like the world's your mall, I could shop all over the world. I was stationed in Singapore for a while and Bangkok for a while, and I would fly into China. I'd fly into Shanghai to get silk, and then we'd bring it back to tailors in Singapore, and they would make beautiful clothing for us. I love flying to Argentina. We'd go and we'd get leather suits made on a layover for dirt cheap. Was it Beaujolais time in France? Okay, let's go get the latest case of Beaujolais that just came out.
I still love it. They say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Well, yeah, you do work a day in your life, but I love it. I've been doing this since I was a kid, 40, and I've been flying 40-some years. And to this day, I still think I have the greatest job in the world. I'm still thrilled when I land someplace and I go out on a layover. I'm like, okay, wow. It's like, okay, as if it's a new place, a new destination, even though I may have been there many times.
Loved it. Loved it. It was the most amazing time of my life.
Why do you love it so much?
There's no school that could teach you that, cultures. It's such a good thing. Sorry. choked up. Yeah, there's no schooling. Sorry.
And why are you being so emotional?
I don't know. Not doing it anymore, you know?
I gave out 50-year service pins when I was in management. That's how much this job meant to people. It was an experience. It wasn't just a job. We have amazing memories of times that, you are just cherished.
Sure, what the heck?
Oh my gosh, you really get a photo?
Absolutely, why not?
Let's see if it does.
I really should have just blown one up because now I got to get out of it.
We wanted to know how professionals have changed over time. So we got different experts from multiple decades to share their experiences.
We took off from JFK and there was a huge explosion. We were like, what? The whole plane is rattling like this. The engine had exploded and all the blades, they looked like Venetian blinds, they're blades inside the engine. They shot out into the plane. I could look at them and they were embedded in the aircraft because we could look out the window and we could see this. The whole plane is shaking. So we have instructions from the captain to do a planned emergency evacuation. We had a list, a plastic card with all the instructions that we had to do. We had to collect eyeglasses and heels so that they didn't go down the slide with them. We had to get 2 able-bodied men for each door in case we died and we weren't able to open the exit. I had to teach you how to do it. So I started to lose it. I started to cry and I started to get crazy. And then I saw my girlfriend Judy. She was little Susie Stewardess, she was doing everything she was supposed to. She was all calm and I said, you know what? If she could do it, I could do it. And if I have to die, I don't want to go like an idiot. I want to have some dignity. So I pulled myself together. This is what you really think of when you're going to die. You pull yourself together and you say, I don't want to go out like that. And we all got everybody ready for landing, to crash land in New York. We had to dump all the fuel over the Atlantic. We came back to JFK. Of course, none of this was in the news because the airlines used to squash any negative press. Not like today, it's on TikTok every 5 minutes. So we landed, and we landed perfectly safe. And we all walked off the airplane, but we were like this. We weren't right.
I with the flight attendants, and I never know if they're actually freaked out, if they're calm.
We're not allowed to. I mean, we don't show you anything. Don't ever look at their faces to get a clue, because they're never going to give it. They're going to be like this.
We're trained to be prepared and not to react. Fire on an airplane is the worst thing. You never want to have to deal with a fire on the aircraft.
I would say probably the scariest moment I had was there was a fire on board. We had taken off, and all of a sudden, probably about 15 minutes into the flight, you could smell smoke in the air. We have incredible training. Our emergency training is amazing. So you just kind of go into a different mode. And I went up and asked the purser, Jay, I said, Jay, what's going on? He goes, Carol, there's a fire in the cockpit. And all of a sudden you think, wow, a fire in the cockpit, it's not something that we hear about a lot. I went back and I got him the fire extinguisher behind the last row of seats in first class. Just as I had gotten up there, the extinguisher in my hand, the door opened up and the cockpit said, we need another extinguisher. And I could see like a semblance of a flame because I was eerily calm. And I handed them the extinguisher, closed the door. I said to Jay, I said, okay. And now I said, okay, he knows me. So I go, now I'm going to pray. And at that point in time, we got a call back from the cockpit, the fire was out. So we needed at that point to get the plane ready to emergency land. We ended up landing safely, thank goodness. And at that point in time, we could see the runway. It seemed like hundreds of fire engines, but maybe there was 10 or 15, 20 that were surrounding the airplane. The fire chief put a ladder up to the forward door and came up there, and he took one look in the cockpit and he said, how did you survive this? Because at that point, it looked like a bomb had gone off in the cockpit. Our pilots were amazing. I think our crew responded so beautifully. And that's where I want passengers to know that the importance of our training and what we can accomplish is so important.
You definitely check your faith real quick, and I'm like, oh, please, God, get me out of this. I'll never fly again. I'll never fly again.
And tomorrow I'm like, oh wait, I gotta check in at 8 a.m. You know, it's the same thing as like when you get too drunk one night, you're like, I'll never drink again. Next week, and you're like, come on guys, let's go out.
I think it was $500 a month. We had to go in and get our paycheck from the airport. You know, there was no computers, there was no, instant paycheck. We had to get dressed up to go to the airport, business attire, get our paycheck, and then go in person, drive to a bank and deposit it. So it was a whole big production on our days off.
You got your base salary, and then you got per diem, and then you also received maybe overtime pay if you flew over X amount of hours. It wasn't the best rate of pay. We all had to live together, especially in a city, high cost of living city like a New York or a London. But we 2 or 3 people would live together in an apartment. And because we were always traveling, you didn't always see your roommate. You might just see them once a month, depending on your flight schedule.
Probably about, $2,000 a month, I think back in the 90s.
When I started, I believe it was $18 an hour or so. It was low. You can't really survive on it, but I was living still with my parents when I started. I was 22 years old.
In the 60s, in the 70s, and the 80s, there were a lot of hijackings. We learned down in training what to do in case of a hijacking, and that was always a fear. And everyone seemed to be going to Cuba. My friend Jeannie was hijacked to Cuba, a DC-10. She was the purser on that flight, and it was a very, very scary. She was flying from New York to St. Croix and St. Croix back. And there was a man who had murdered several people, was being escorted by 3 air marshals. In those days, you were allowed to be uncuffed, and you're allowed to walk around the airplane. He went to the bathroom several times. He was looking for a gun that had been planted in the bathroom. And so he kept going back and forth to the bathroom, and the flight attendants noticed everything. Come to find out, he found the gun, and he disabled the air marshals and had them on the ground, and then he demanded to be sent to Cuba. In those days, we were taught to cooperate. We were told to talk to the hijackers about their family, about our family, to make ourselves be a human being to them. She had a gun pointed to her temple for the entire flight from St. Croix to Cuba, but they weren't sure if they had enough fuel to land in Cuba, but they did. Fidel Castro was in a good mood that night, and he invited he took the hijacker off the airplane, and he's still walking free today, that hijacker. But they were nice to the crew when they landed, and they let them come out and have a bite to eat and buy things in the gift shop. And they were allowed to get fueled up and come home. And Jeannie ended up getting one of the highest awards the U.S. government ever gave for her exemplary work that night and keeping him calm and that nobody died. 9/11 was different because we tried to make ourselves appear more human to them. But on 9/11, we thought we were going to land someplace, but we didn't. We never dreamed they'd be crashing the plane into a building.
It is a hard picture to see. It is the clipper made of the seas that was bombed over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988. Through the investigation after the fact, it was discovered that a bomb had been planted in luggage that somehow made it through Frankfurt on a connecting flight through London to New York. There was a Libyan gentleman who was arrested and put in prison for the bombing of Pan Am 103. There's a lot of different stories, and depending on who you listen to as to whether they were conspirators or Gaddafi, if he was behind the bombing in retaliation to a bombing of a Libyan site. I think for us, the investigation obviously is important, and especially for the families, because they need to hold people accountable and responsible. They're suffering still today. I was working at the flight service office at the time, and when a phone rang, and it was operations calling to tell us that the 103 was off radar. If there's an airplane off radar, that only means one or two things. There was either mechanical issues or something terrible happened. And sadly, something horrible had happened. I went over to the airport. A lot of the people were arriving to meet what should have been the inbound aircraft from London. And that included the parents of a lot of the Syracuse students that were coming back from their semester abroad. I distinctly remember, and will stay with me to my last day, the mother of one of the students who was there at the podium. She fell to the floor and let out a blood-curdling scream that only a parent could really understand the depths of her despair at that point. It was horrific. It's one of the darkest days in the airline's history. And it was only a few short years later that Pan Am went out of business. People weren't flying Pan Am anymore. We were recognized as the subject of terrorism, and people were scared to fly. The State Department, a lot of different government agencies were putting alerts out not to fly Pan Am. 747s were going out basically empty, maybe 15, 20 people on a plane. And unfortunately, this is the picture that is used so often on the anniversary of the flight. And it just brings back that gut feeling, that sadness in you, knowing that this was the end of something great.
After Lockerbie happened, it was kind of the writing was on the wall that I didn't think that Pan Am was going to be able to survive. I think after this happened, I think it was really difficult for Pan Am to restructure, because at that point we were, we were really financially in difficulty. And so I think we had just gotten an opportunity to kind of re-emerge. We were told that Delta was going to come in and get some financial backing. And so apparently, for whatever reason, they pulled out at the end. And so that's when the hopes were dashed. And I think Lockerbie had a huge part in that, obviously maybe in that decision. But I'm always an optimist. I've always been an optimist since I was a little kid. So, that optimistic part of me was going to be like, I stayed with them till the very end. I'll never forget December 4th, 1991. I was flying back from Mexico City, and I'd had the most amazing layover. I was flying with a great crew. We'd gone to the pyramids. We had this wonderful Mexican fiesta the night before, and we landed in JFK, and cleaners came on board and said, Pan Am ceased to operate. And that was probably one of the hardest moments. I think the whole crew, we all just started crying. And I think anytime when someone comes on and says, your company that you love has ceased to operate, it's a huge, huge shock to you. There was a lot of flight attendants that got stuck in different places, and it was just trying to get these people back and trying to get them on airlines that could take them back. So the whole everything was just put into this giant, uproar, where all of a sudden, what do I do with these tickets? Who's going to honor them? I've just lost all this money, my vacations, everything. And so to me, it's always had, an uncomfortable taste in my mouth, experiencing that situation. The beginning of the 90s, I'm grateful that once I was able to get on with United, I was fortunate they took us on. They had taken on the Pacific routes a number of years ago that they had bought from Pan Am. So I had friends that I had flown with many, many years ago flying for United.
There was a lot of things that were synonymous with the incredible corporation that was Pan Am that went up for sale. We had to sell the Pan Am building in Manhattan, and then ultimately culminating in the sale of the Pacific to United in 1986, which was really the heart and soul of the airline.
The airline that brings you 10 countries across Asia and the Pacific now bridges the Atlantic to Europe. Come fly the airline that spans more than half the world. United.
I think that was kind of a shock that they, had bought the routes from Pan Am. I guess you always thought of Pan Am as flying all over the world at the time. And so I think sharing our route structure giving away part of our route structure, they bought our route structure, was surprising. It benefited United, which turned out to be, a wonderful thing for me later on in my career. I think that at times Pan Am was looking to sell different things and different routes, and depending upon the situation of the airline at the time, and sometimes you just need to make a little extra money, and so maybe they felt that it was a good investment to share, to sell off part of our route structure. It was one of my hardest times in the 90s, I think, was realizing that a career that I loved all of a sudden stopped. But I have to say that these are probably some of the best years of my life, was flying for Pan Am.
September 11th was on a Tuesday, and I came in the day before from Portugal, and I turned on the television and I watched the second plane hit live. that was definitely a crazy day. I was with Continental at that time. Continental and United had not merged. We came to find out that no Continental airplane was used that day for the attacks, but United's airplanes were.
They had said that a small plane had hit the World Trade Center. It was red, white, and blue, which alarmed me, and then it came out that it was Flight 11 from Boston. And my friend Diane Bullis was on that plane, Diane Snyder, and the hijackers were in first class. My friends had Mohammed Atta on the flight the previous summer, before 9/11, in July and August, going back and forth to San Francisco. He was looking at taking Flight 59, and he wouldn't eat or drink anything, and he would only deal with the male flight attendants. He would not deal with the female flight attendants, and he was as cold as ice. So they got this really weird vibe from him, and they all remembered him. But on 9/11 that day, when the second plane hit, and I saw that on TV, I knew, as everybody did, that it was terrorism. And it was horrendous.
Airspace closed down on Tuesday, and Friday was the first day that that airspace was open. I was doing a flight that Friday from Newark to São Paulo, Brazil. And, you know, we don't profile anybody on an airplane, but that day, everybody was profiling everybody. It was just a scary time period, you know. Everybody's like, who are you? You know, what are you doing? Yeah. We hadn't met the pilot yet. And I went to the cockpit to introduce myself, and he's sitting with the crash axe on top of the instruments. And when I saw that, I was just like, whoa, this is rough. Right after September 11th, it was kind of like the COVID thing now. There was nobody flying. Nobody flew after September 11th. Like, it was, planes were empty. People just didn't want to fly. Everybody was scared. They started bringing in self-defense training, and, you know, how to defend ourselves, how to block properly, what to use on an aircraft, things that we can use. It was a different culture, different lifestyle.
Did you think it was less enjoyable to fly after 9/11?
Yeah, a lot less enjoyable.
Why is that?
Well, just everybody was on edge.
In the old days, we wouldn't go through security. There was no security. I remember I would leave my house in Long Beach at 8:30 for a 9 o'clock flight. I would park in the pay lot and run to the gate and just sign in and just go to the airplane. You couldn't have to do that now.
Oh, security was very different. Passengers, your family could go with you. You could take people through security. They could, you know, wave and see you off at the gate.
Now everybody's got to take off their shoes. You got to understand, once that flight takes off, that's it. You know, you're not turning around for, oh, forgot this, or you got to get that, or you got to make sure everything is good. And that security is part of everything being good.
Okay, this is graduation day in 1976, June 24th, and that's me right here. And that was a Bill Blass uniform. He was a designer, a very famous designer in the 70s, Bill Blass. All the airlines had designer uniforms. Every airline competed to have the best uniforms, and ours was Bill Blass, and I loved it. We had blue vests and we had red vests, and we always had to have our wings on. So this, because we were flying to the Caribbean, we were allowed to not have the jacket on because it was so hot in the Caribbean. This is still the Bill Blass scarf that I was so proud to wear, and we had to wear 3-inch heels. I have a pair of the pants that I graduated with in, and they're swimming on me because this is how long the pants drag on the floor because of the heels. We had to wear 3-inch heels. So I didn't really have a problem wearing high heels when I was 21. Now now I wear Skechers.
This is the Edith Head uniform, and you can tell by the cloche hat and the scarf at the neck. And this was actually the first uniform that I wore when I was hired from Pan Am. Edith Head was a famous fashion designer, Academy Award-winning fashion designer, and Pan Am was fortunate to be able to hire several well-known Academy Award fashion designers to design Pan Am uniforms, which were considered very classic. The cloche hat was really a symbol of Pan Am at the time and used frequently in Pan Am promotions. Well, this picture was clearly taken after 1980 when Pan Am introduced a new uniform. I wore this uniform, which is the Adolfo uniform, created by the designer Adolfo. And it was a great, very business-oriented style uniform, as you can see with the Navy, and we all really loved and felt proud wearing it.
You can't really tell me now, but that's a jacket I have on now. It's actually retained the same jacket, the same style as the 2020s. And so the thing different in this picture is the blouse and the colors where it had mauve with the navy in it. But I have the wings here from the 90s, my original wings that I was pinned on.
Do you know who designed that uniform?
I don't. You could walk through a terminal back in the 80s and all of a sudden people are like, oh my gosh, look at that uniform. Or, you'd think, okay, Edith Head designed that or Adolfo designed it. And so it was just, I think there's more an emphasis on uniforms back in the 80s.
Standard, we had same type of shirt I'm wearing now with the epaulets and the standard wings. He's wearing a white serving garment. Yeah, he looked like a bartender. That's what we looked like in first class.
Do you remember who designed that?
This one, I don't think we weren't into designers. I don't remember. I don't recall.
I think it was in 2016 we got the most beautiful gray uniforms, and we had this red Cole Haan purse. Everybody looked fabulous in this uniform until people, Facebook was around then. People started writing that their heart was racing, that they had rashes all over their bodies. One person had to go to the emergency room. They thought they were having a heart attack. And these are young flight attendants that are all of a sudden having all these things. And it was affecting pets. If you had your uniform in the garage and you had your cat there, pets were dying when they were being exposed to these uniforms. And it wasn't until the cockpit really raised a big question, because they had poison shirts as well. They said, that we have an issue, that I have a serious issue in the cockpit and this has to be dealt with. And then I went to a meeting with American Airlines. It was like a shareholders meeting, and I brought a poster board of all the injuries of all the flight attendants with their pictures, and I spoke to Doug Parker and I said, these are your flight attendants, these are your people. I said, they're getting very sick, some of them have died. I said, you need to take care of your people. And 3 days later, he pulled the uniform, the Twin Hill uniform. And so we don't have that contract anymore. He canceled that contract. So I guess I made a difference.
But do you know what was causing it?
Formaldehyde, cadmium, all sorts of crazy things that shouldn't be in a cloth, because they weren't, I think it's called OTEX, they weren't approved. You know how the United States has rules and regulations on fabrics that they make in the United States? But if you buy from Bangladesh and all these other countries that don't have that, because they're cheaper, your health is being affected. They don't have the same standards. The day before 9/11, we ratified a contract where we got a huge raise and we had to give it back. And we gave it back gladly because we didn't want the airline to go under. Airlines were going under, and we didn't want American to go under. The discount airlines came, JetBlue came, Spirit came, Frontier came, and the legacy airlines, we couldn't compete with these low-cost carriers because they were no frills. And so we had to slowly start cutting amenities. The magazines went, the pillows went, the blankets went, but people still expected the high service because they knew about Americans' high service. And then after 9/11, you didn't get food. And then we brought back sandwiches, and let's say for a full plane, they gave me 25 sandwiches. And these poor people, I didn't have enough food for people. I mean, people would start crying.
The reason Pan Am probably ultimately had to fold was the fact that it didn't have a domestic route system. Every time Pan Am made an application to what at that time was the CAB for approvals, it was denied. We had fallen out of favor with the government. But while American carriers, like American, like United, like Northwest, were granted international route authority, so they were in direct competition with us, we didn't have the ability then to develop the domestic route structure to feed our international flights. There was also entering into the market a very different focus of onboard service. And it was moving away from the business model that Pan Am had prized for decades, and that being a real premium service. Now people were putting at the forefront of their ticket purchases price. It was more of an economy class driven carrier that were offering, low, cheap flights.
I think the low-cost carriers definitely created more of a price war for the tickets because they were offering sometimes lesser prices on certain routes. So we had to become more competitive. But I think bottom line, though, passengers wanted to, the passengers who fly a lot, there's certain things that they're willing to pay for and certain, things that they're willing to maybe have more reliability in a company that's been around for a long time. And some of these low-cost carriers were just popping up. So some of them would last, a short time, some of them would last a few years, and some have grown into big carriers. We saw them come and go in the 90s.
In 2010 was the merge on paper. It was bittersweet, It's bittersweet for me.
How so?
Well, I'm an ex-con, ex-continental. That's our ongoing joke when we tell people, I'm an ex-con. They're like, what?
So that meant that they were not united. They were ex-cons.
Do you roll your eyes? You're like, oh, this joke again.
I know, it's so silly. Yeah.
Continental was the best company ever to work for. The best. From our CEO, this man right here. I'll call him Gordo. His name is Gordon Bethune. This man took Continental Airlines from worst to first. He literally in 1 year the company was at the bottom position and he took it to #1 airline in the United States. And he knows exactly how to run an airline. But I'll never forget one day I'm in Newark Airport and I'm going on a flight. And I see him on his cell phone, and I just wanted to catch his attention, just to say hello, acknowledge him, right? And I see him, and I give him a hey, and he tells the person on the phone, hey, I'll call you back, and he hangs up, and he looks at my ID, and he's like, hey, Carlos, where are you going? And I'm like, I'm going to Lisbon, Portugal. He's like, oh yeah, you got to try the port wine out there, And I'm like, my boss is telling me to go have port wine on his dime, Just knew how to, he wasn't saying, hey, go out and get sloshed. He was saying, we were a team. Now it's very corporate, very, by the book and different. Food in coach was cut, a lot of those different things. Now it's the program now with the points. It's crazy for us. It's nuts because everybody's looking on their phone. Like, am I the next one to get upgraded? United created this thing called basic economy, which is basically no bags whatsoever. So people don't understand that it means no bags. It's just your little bag that you can put under the seat in front of you, and that's it.
While other airlines are taking things away, Continental still offers things like pillows, blankets, and meals at mealtime.
Yeah, Continental, work hard, fly right. I love Continental. I mean, I could sit here all day and tell you positives of Continental.
So why did other airlines start to take stuff away?
I tell you, it became very numbers, numbers. And I think that also changes the way the employees act, That means it changes the way the employees act towards the customers, the way the customer sees the company. I don't know, man. I really don't know.
Do you remember the safety instruction?
No. I was not the one reading it ever because I was never the boss. I didn't want to be the boss. Of course, this doesn't take rocket science. It's just, of course, now I can't get it open. It was all fun and games till you have an emergency, and then you realize this could happen any day, any time. You sit in your jump seat and you think of your commands that you have to say. Unfasten seatbelts, come this way, don't take anything with you, remove your shoes, jump, jump, jump. I still say it, in my dreams.
Safety, though, has always been one of the main reasons why we are on that airplane, is to take care of passengers in case of an emergency and make sure that they can get out and that they're taken care of.
There's an evacuation. Do you know what to do? You don't know what to do. And while that safety video was going on, you were talking with the guy next to you. I'm there to save your ass, not serve your ass.
I don't know that I would put it in quite the same terms as a colleague, but yeah, our primary reason for being there is for safety. We're trained. We know how to get you off the airplane.
We're trained in all kinds of medical things. If you're having a heart attack, CPR, the defibrillator, we know how to use these things.
I had medical emergencies where I had to give people oxygen and I had to do mouth-to-mouth on people. I had to give continuous oxygen to somebody for 4 or 5 hours. And I had to operate all the oxygen tanks, which are hard to operate into. And then when they get exhausted, then you have to refill them. Then I had another guy who passed out, and I had to get him out of his seat, lay him down on the ground. I did mouth-to-mouth on him. Turned out he had the flu. Wonderful. They got dressed up to fly, and they were all in a good mood because they were going from New York to California, and they were on vacation, and they were happy, and they all wanted a cocktail. But then after 9/11, it was not about service anymore. It was about safety and security. I don't care who you are. I don't care what's going on with you. I don't care what vacation you're on. You have to listen to the flight attendant and obey the rules.
It was a special thing, going to the airport or going on a flight. And so they would get in their Sunday best because they were going to go, they were going to have a nice flight, they were going to have a nice meal on board the aircraft.
Passengers in the 90s may have been a little bit more laid back. Today you have to deal with so much more. You deal with the long security lines, you deal with, delays more so than I think back then because there weren't as many flights going on. So I think passengers today, get very frustrated at times when maybe the airplanes, break down or something happens.
Everybody started complaining about everything, and the company would kind of I guess not to hear them or to silence them or whatever. They would side with them and give them things. So you would complain, and you were basically rewarded for bad behavior. There's a rule. It's basically you can't interfere with crew member instructions. Basically, if a crew member tells you to do something, you have to follow directions. But nowadays, after COVID, that whole thing with the masks, there's fights constantly on airplanes. We would tell people to wear a mask, and no. So it's like, what do? You tell them again, hopefully they put the mask on. I had names called, so many names called at me during that mask period. I would tell people, hey, you need to put your mask on. F you, I don't got to do nothing. I'm not doing what you tell me. I'm like, actually, you have to do it, I tell you, because that's the rule. But that's what I'm saying. It's like the company were taking the sides. After a while, they were taking the sides of the passengers. I'm like,
well, it's a different world flying today than when I was flying. I think there's a distinct lack of respect for people who are in positions of authority, which is your flight crew on board the aircraft. And it's kind of sad. Did we ever have people who were acting up on flights? Yeah, sure. But in general, that was rare. And today, it seems to be almost a norm. That there's an expectation, if you're not happy with something, that one, you don't have to listen to this crew member, and two, you can demand or insist or take matters into your own hands, which is very dangerous.
We want a calm environment up there, man. You're at 38,000 feet flying. When I say flying, I mean flying. You're going fast. And there's no let's stop really quick and, let's pause this. No, you got to make sure everything is cool.
They don't respect the flight attendants today. And I heard of a flight attendant getting her teeth knocked out maybe 2 years ago because she asked somebody to put their seatbelt on. People had to have money to fly in the old days, and they had to get dressed up. And now, with the cheaper fares, you're getting people who don't understand what it's like to fly. And it's not easy to fly now. You have to make sure you don't drink a lot of coffee because you can't be getting up to go to the bathroom constantly. You have to make sure that you bring your own food because it's not guaranteed that it's going to be food on your flight. And what if you have a delay? You have to bring snacks. You have to bring something to entertain yourself. You have to bring your headphones. You don't need us today as much as you did for service. You don't need us to do all the service, but you still need us for safety too. You know, we had a change in ownership. We had Robert Crandall for a long time. He was tough, but he didn't take the money and put it in his pocket. He put the money back into the airline. But we had Doug Parker, who came from America West, who came from US Air, and they took over as managers, and they're not used to running a legacy carrier. And they had all these ideas. They were like a bunch of college frat boys. They didn't really see the big picture that Crandall did. Why would you ever take the screens out of the seat backs? It makes them so happy, the customers. They're so happy. They want to watch a TV show. They want to watch a movie. They're quiet. They're happy the whole flight. When they have nothing, they get more aggravated about little things.
Oh, I've always been service oriented, so I just wish that we had more to offer the passengers, especially in economy. You know, sometimes we'll have a longer flight, and now we're offering a little bit more snacks in the back, and then we have snacks for purchase. It's hard, especially in the morning, or if you're just getting a drink and and maybe just a little biscuit or something. It's just, to me, it's not enough.
It's totally different. I come from a generation of flight attendants. You know, you can say, I say pre-September 11th. But there's people that now, new kids, they say pre-COVID, everything's changed. Every time there's a situation, things get implemented in that just takes the fun out of that. Stories that I heard from past, from senior flight attendants, I'm 25 years. I was flying with 40-year flight attendants. Hearing their stories, whoa. They're like, yeah, we used to carve the roast. And we had the roast in the middle of the aisle, and real silverware, and it's beautiful, like great things. Now it's like it turned into a bus. It's a commute.